I'm sitting in my car in the Silver Enterprises parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles have gone white. My phone buzzes with another text from my biggest client, and I can't help but smile through the tears of frustration still burning behind my eyes. 4 days ago, I thought my career was over. Now? Well, let me tell you exactly how spectacularly wrong my supervisor was about who connects better with clients. My name is Leah Phillips, and I've been grinding at Silver Enterprises for 3 years. 3 years of staying late, perfecting presentations, and building relationships that most people in this company could only dream of. But apparently, none of that mattered to Vincent Cromwell, my supervisor, who seemed to think having a corner office automatically made him God's gift to client relations. You know that feeling when someone dismisses months of your hard work with a single, cutting sentence? That's exactly where this story begins. It was Tuesday morning, and I was putting the finishing touches on a presentation for Quantum Industries, our most lucrative potential client. 6 months I'd been nurturing this relationship. 6 months of research calls, coffee meetings, and slowly building trust with their procurement team. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday, and I was ready to close a deal worth nearly $2 million. But let me back up and give you the full picture of how twisted this whole situation really was. Vincent Cromwell had been my supervisor for 18 months, ever since the company restructured and decided they needed fresh leadership in our division. Fresh leadership, apparently, meant hiring someone from outside the industry who had zero understanding of our client base but possessed an MBA and an inflated sense of his own importance. From day one, Vincent made it clear that he thought our entire team was operating beneath his standards. He'd walk through our section with this expression of barely concealed disgust, like he was surveying a particularly disappointing art installation. The man actually brought in a consultant to optimize our workflow, which mostly involved creating more paperwork and scheduling weekly meetings where he could lecture us about synergistic client engagement strategies. I'd learned to navigate his ego carefully. When he'd interrupt my client calls to suggest improvements that would have destroyed months of relationship building, I'd smile and nod, then do exactly what I knew worked. When he'd critique my presentation styles in front of the team, I'd thank him for his valuable feedback and continue delivering results that consistently outperformed his golden boy Brandon. But the quantum industry situation? That was personal. See, Vincent had been trying to get his hands on the quantum account since the day I landed the initial meeting. Not because he understood the industry or had any relevant experience, but because it was our biggest potential deal, and he wanted his name attached to it. He'd been dropping hints for weeks about bringing in additional support and leveraging senior-level relationships. What he didn't know was that I'd been documenting everything. Every passive-aggressive comment, every attempt to undermine my work, every time he'd taken credit for my successes in management meetings. I'm talking screenshots of emails, saved voicemails, detailed notes about conversations. Call it paranoia, but I'd seen too many talented people get pushed out of companies by insecure managers to not protect myself. The Tuesday morning when everything exploded started like any other day. I arrived at 7:30 a.m., grabbed my usual coffee from the machine that never quite worked properly, and settled in to review my quantum presentation one final time. I'd spent the previous evening practicing my pitch, timing each section to perfection. This wasn't just about closing a deal, it was about proving that all those late nights and weekend calls had been worth it. At exactly 8:47 a.m., Vincent walked into my cubicle with that smug expression he reserves for moments when he's about to ruin someone's day. "Phillips, I'm reassigning the quantum account." I looked up from my laptop, certain I'd misheard. The coffee I'd been drinking suddenly tasted like ash. "Excuse me? Brandon will be handling Thursday's presentation." "He connects better than you," Vincent said, his voice flat and dismissive, like he was discussing the weather rather than obliterating months of my work. The words hit me like a physical blow. Brandon Clark, the golden boy who'd been hired straight out of his MBA program 6 months ago. Sure, he had the Ivy League pedigree and the expensive suits, but he'd never even spoken to anyone at Quantum Industries. He didn't know their pain points, their company culture, or the intricate details of their procurement process that I'd spent half a year learning. But here's what really made my blood boil: Brandon had been in Vincent's office for over an hour the previous afternoon. I'd seen him through the glass walls, laughing and gesturing animatedly while Vincent nodded approvingly. They weren't discussing strategy or client needs. They were bonding over their shared alma mater, their mutual connections, their weekend golf games. "Vincent, with all due respect, I've been building this relationship since January. Miranda Foster specifically requested. The decision is final, Phillips. He turned to leave, then paused with what I can only describe as theatrical cruelty. Maybe you can learn something by watching how it's done properly. Brandon has a natural executive presence that clients respond to. Natural executive presence. Translation: he's a tall white guy in a suit who went to the right school. I nodded. What else could I do? I walked away from my cubicle, past the break room where Brandon was already bragging to anyone who'd listen about his big opportunity, and straight to the bathroom where I allowed myself exactly 2 minutes to feel the full weight of what had just happened. But here's the thing about being underestimated: it gives you a certain kind of freedom. When people think you're not a threat, they stop watching what you're doing. And Vincent Cromwell was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The rest of Tuesday was a masterclass in corporate torture. Vincent scheduled an emergency meeting to discuss the transition, where he spent 45 minutes explaining to Brandon, in front of me, all the obvious improvements that could be made to my approach. He suggested changes that would have insulted Quantum's intelligence, proposed presentations that completely ignored their stated priorities, and recommended follow-up strategies that would have killed any chance of future business. Brandon took notes eagerly, occasionally glancing at me with what I think was supposed to be sympathetic understanding but came across as condescending pity. At one point, he actually said, "Don't worry, Leah. I'll make sure to mention your contributions when I close the deal." Your contributions. Like I was some junior assistant who'd fetched coffee for the real professionals. That evening, I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine and my laptop, staring at Miranda Foster's contact information. What I was contemplating felt both terrifying and absolutely necessary, but I needed to think it through completely. See, what my dear supervisor didn't know was that I hadn't just built a professional relationship with Quantum Industries. I'd built genuine connections. Real friendships. The kind that don't disappear just because some guy in a corner office decides to shuffle papers around. Miranda and I had bonded over our shared experience as women navigating male-dominated industries. Her assistant, Carol, always asked about my cat after I'd mentioned him during a casual conversation. Their head of operations, Frederick, had actually invited me to his daughter's college graduation because I'd helped him understand the technical specifications he needed to explain to his board. These weren't just business relationships. They were human connections built on mutual respect and genuine care for each other's success. But making that phone call meant crossing a line I couldn't uncross. It meant prioritizing my relationships over corporate loyalty. It meant accepting that my future at Silver Enterprises was probably over regardless of what happened with Quantum. You know what? Sometimes burning bridges is the only way to light your path forward. I called Miranda from my personal phone at 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday. Leah. I was just thinking about you. Are we still on for Thursday? I've been telling everyone here about your proposal. Frederick is practically vibrating with excitement about the implementation timeline you suggested. My heart clenched. Actually, Miranda, that's why I'm calling. There's been a change, and I wanted you to hear it from me personally. I explained the situation as professionally as possible, emphasizing that Silver Enterprises was still committed to the partnership, just with different representation. Miranda's silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. I see, she finally said, her tone noticeably cooler. And you're comfortable with this change? The question hung in the air. I could lie, maintain the corporate facade, and watch Brandon fumble through a presentation about a company he knew nothing about. Or I could be honest. Miranda, you know I can't speak against company decisions. But I will say this, you deserve someone who understands your needs and respects the work we've done together. Someone who remembers that you prefer morning meetings because your energy is better, who knows that Frederick gets anxious about timeline changes, and who understands that Carol's questions aren't delays, they're how your team ensures quality. Another pause. Then, Brandon Clark, you said? Yes. And he's been working on our account how long? He'll be getting up to speed this week. Understood, Leah. Thanks for the heads up. This conversation, it stays between us, right? Of course. Good. Because I'd hate for anyone to think you were anything less than completely professional. Wednesday arrived with all the subtlety of a soap opera. Vincent strutted around the office like a peacock, making pointed comments about fresh perspectives and elevating our client interactions. He'd clearly briefed Brandon extensively, because the kid was suddenly using industry terminology he'd never uttered before and name-dropping contacts he'd obviously Googled the night before. But here's what was really happening behind the scenes, something Vincent's arrogance prevented him from seeing. At 10:15 a.m., I watched through the conference room windows as Brandon rehearsed his presentation for Vincent and two other managers. Even from a distance, I could see it was a disaster. Brandon was using slides I'd created, but he clearly didn't understand the content. He was reading directly from the notes, stumbling over technical terms, and completely missing the nuanced understanding of Quantum's business model that had taken me months to develop. Vincent, however, was nodding approvingly. He actually applauded when Brandon finished, then launched into a speech about the difference between good and great client service. At lunch, I overheard Brandon on the phone with someone, probably a friend or family member, bragging about how he was about to crush this presentation and show everyone how it's done. He mentioned something about this being his breakout moment and how he'd been waiting for a chance to prove himself. I felt a strange mix of anger and pity. Brandon wasn't a bad person, just an inexperienced one who'd been set up to fail by a manager more interested in ego than results. But Wednesday afternoon brought a delicious twist I hadn't anticipated. At 3:47 p.m., my desk phone rang. Internal call. Leah, this is Patricia from HR. Could you stop by my office when you have a moment? Patricia Williams had been with Silver Enterprises for 12 years, and she'd seen enough office politics to recognize trouble brewing. I'd always respected her directness and her genuine concern for employee welfare. Close the door, she said when I arrived. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Have you documented any instances of discrimination or unfair treatment from Vincent Cromwell? The question caught me off guard, but I recovered quickly. Why do you ask? Because I've received some inquiries from other team members about recent decisions in your department. And frankly, the quantum industry's reassignment has raised some red flags with upper management. They're asking questions about whether proper protocols were followed. I thought about my documentation folder, stuffed with screenshots and detailed notes. I may have some records that could be relevant. Good. Keep them safe. And Leah? Whatever happens with the quantum presentation tomorrow, make sure you're prepared for the aftermath. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to your career is getting pushed out of a situation that was never going to appreciate your talents anyway. Patricia's words hit me like lightning. She knew something I didn't, and she was essentially giving me permission to protect myself. Wednesday evening brought the most beautiful phone call of my professional life. Leah? It's Miranda. Listen, we've decided to postpone Thursday's meeting. Oh? I kept my voice carefully neutral, though my heart was racing. Yes, there's been some internal discussion about whether Silver Enterprises truly understands our company culture and values. We're going to take some time to reassess our options. I felt a flutter of hope but kept it contained. Of course, Miranda. I understand completely. I hope you do, Leah. I really hope you do. Because between you and me, we've been having conversations about what qualities we value most in our vendor relationships. Consistency, reliability, genuine understanding of our business needs. Things that can't just be transferred from one person to another like a file folder. The implication was crystal clear. Also, Miranda continued, I should mention that we've been approached by Pinnacle Solutions about a similar partnership. They have someone on their team who comes highly recommended by mutual acquaintances. Someone with exactly the kind of experience and relationship building skills we value. My breath caught. Pinnacle Solutions was Silver Enterprises' biggest competitor, and they'd been trying to break into our market segment for years. That's certainly their prerogative, I managed. Indeed it is. Have a good evening, Leah. I have a feeling things are about to get very interesting. Thursday morning arrived with all the drama of a Shakespearean tragedy. I was at my desk by 7 a.m., ostensibly working on other accounts but actually waiting for the inevitable explosion. The quantum meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., and I had a front row seat to what was about to unfold. At 9:45, Brandon walked past my cubicle looking nervous but determined. He was carrying the presentation folder I'd prepared, wearing his most expensive suit, and practicing his opening lines under his breath. Vincent intercepted him near the conference room, giving him what appeared to be a final pep talk and several aggressive shoulder pats. At 10:03, I watched Vincent escort Brandon to the elevator, both of them looking confident and self-satisfied. Vincent actually winked at me as they passed my desk. At 10:47, my personal phone buzzed with a text from Miranda, interesting development. We'll call you later. At 11:23, Vincent and Brandon returned from their off-site meeting. The change in their demeanor was visible from across the office. Brandon looked confused and deflated. Vincent's jaw was clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. But the real fireworks didn't start until 2:15 p.m. Actually, let me paint this picture properly for you. Imagine the most satisfying moment of vindication you've ever experienced, multiply it by 10, and you're getting close to what happened next. Vincent's office door flew open so hard it bounced off the wall. His face was red, his carefully styled hair disheveled, and he was moving toward my cubicle with the desperate energy of a man whose world was crumbling. Phillips. Why are they refusing to meet him? The entire office went silent. Every conversation stopped, every keyboard fell quiet, and suddenly I was the center of attention for all the right reasons. I looked up from my computer with what I hoped was an expression of innocent confusion. I'm sorry, who's refusing to meet whom? Quantum Industries. Vincent's voice cracked slightly. They won't take the meeting with Brandon. They're saying there are cultural alignment concerns and they need to reassess their vendor relationships. What did you tell them? Here's where I could have taken the high road. I could have played dumb, claimed ignorance, and maintained the corporate peace. But sometimes, the high road is overrated. I told them the truth, Vincent. That Silver Enterprises was committed to the partnership with different representation. I paused, savoring the moment. I also mentioned that they deserved someone who understood their needs and respected the work we'd done together. The color drained from Vincent's face as the implications hit him. A $2 million deal, gone. 6 months of relationship building, wasted. And worst of all, it was his own arrogance that had caused it. You sabotaged the deal? I gave them accurate information and respected their right to make informed decisions. Isn't that what good client service looks like? Brandon appeared at Vincent's shoulder, looking like a deer caught in headlights. Sir, they won't even return my calls. They said something about incompatible business philosophies and lacking institutional knowledge. I don't understand what happened. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. What happened, I said, standing up so the entire office could hear me clearly, is that you tried to treat a 6-month relationship like a PowerPoint presentation. You assume that clients are interchangeable commodities who'll work with anyone in a suit, regardless of trust, understanding, or proven track record. Vincent's face was now approaching purple. You had no right to interfere with the company initiative. I had every right to maintain honest communication with a client I've been serving for 6 months. Unless, of course, you're suggesting I should have lied to them? The trap was beautiful in its simplicity. If Vincent admitted I should have lied, he'd be acknowledging unethical business practices. If he admitted I was right to be honest, he'd be acknowledging that his decision was flawed. He chose option 3, explosive rage. You're insubordinate, unprofessional, and clearly not a team player. This kind of behavior is exactly why we need leadership that can make tough decisions about personnel. Tough decisions, I repeated slowly. Like reassigning accounts based on personal preferences rather than performance metrics? Like promoting inexperienced team members over proven producers? Like creating hostile work environments for anyone who doesn't fit your particular demographic? The office was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Even Brandon had the good sense to back away from the confrontation. I think, came a voice from behind Vincent, we need to take this conversation somewhere more private. Patricia Williams had appeared like an avenging angel, flanked by 2 senior managers I recognized but had never spoken to directly. Her expression was calm but her eyes were steel. Vincent, my office. Now. Brandon, you too. Leah, please remain available for the rest of the afternoon. What happened next unfolded over the course of 3 hours and felt like watching justice work in real time. At 3:30 p.m., Patricia called me into a conference room where I spent 90 minutes providing detailed accounts of the past 18 months, supported by the documentation I'd been carefully maintaining. Screenshots of emails where Vincent had taken credit for my work. Voice recordings of meetings where he'd made inappropriate comments about cultural fit. Detailed notes about instances where he'd undermined my client relationships for personal gain. At 5 p.m., Vincent was escorted out of the building by security, carrying a small cardboard box and wearing the expression of someone who'd just watched their entire world collapse. At 5:30 p.m., Brandon approached my desk to apologize and ask if there was anything he could have done differently. I told him the truth: respect the relationships that came before you, and never underestimate the people who built them. But here's the real kicker, the part that makes this story worth telling. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Pinnacle Solutions. Apparently, Miranda Foster had recommended me personally for a senior account management position. Better salary, better benefits, better respect, and most importantly, the opportunity to bring my existing client relationships with me. The conversation with Pinnacle's hiring manager was unlike any job interview I'd ever experienced. Instead of grilling me about my qualifications, she wanted to understand my approach to relationship building and client service. She'd already spoken to Miranda, Frederick, and Carol, all of whom had provided glowing recommendations. "Here's what I don't understand," the hiring manager said. "If you were so successful at Silver Enterprises, why did they let you go?" "They didn't let me go," I corrected. "I chose to leave after it became clear that my values weren't aligned with their leadership philosophy." "And what are your values?" "That relationships matter more than hierarchy. That trust is earned through consistency, not credentials. That the best business decisions are made by people who understand both the client's needs and their own team's capabilities." "Perfect. When can you start?" My last day at Silver Enterprises was oddly satisfying. The interim manager who'd replaced Vincent actually asked for my input on team restructuring and client relationship management. Brandon, now chastened by his experience, requested mentorship on building authentic client connections. Even Patricia stopped by to tell me she'd used my situation as a case study in a company-wide training on proper management practices. As I cleaned out my desk, I found the notes from my very first call with Quantum Industries. 6 months of careful relationship building, reduced to a folder Vincent thought he could just reassign to someone else. I smiled, shredded the notes, and walked away. But the story doesn't end there. 6 months into my new position at Pinnacle Solutions, I closed the Quantum Industries deal. Same parameters, same timeline, same $2 million value. The only difference was that this time, I was working for a company that understood the value of the relationships I'd built. Miranda sent me a bottle of champagne with a note to partnerships built on mutual respect and genuine understanding. Here's to many more years of success together. Vincent, I heard through the industry grapevine, took a job at a much smaller firm where his responsibilities were significantly reduced. Brandon eventually found his footing at Silver Enterprises, though it took him nearly a year to build the kind of client relationships I'd been developing naturally. You know what I learned from all this? Your relationships are your real currency in this business. Not your title, not your corner office, not even your MBA from wherever. It's the trust you build, the connections you nurture, and the respect you earn through consistent, authentic work. And sometimes, just sometimes, the people who try to take that away from you learn exactly how valuable it really was. The truth is, Vincent did me a favor. His arrogance and short-sightedness forced me out of a situation where I was undervalued and into one where my skills are appreciated and rewarded. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's simply allowing people to face the natural consequences of their actions while you move forward to better things. So if you're dealing with a supervisor who doesn't see your worth, remember this: your relationships belong to you. Your expertise belongs to you. And your ability to walk away and take all of that somewhere else, that definitely belongs to you. Because at the end of the day, Vincent Cromwell learned something valuable too. He learned that when you treat people like they're disposable, you might just discover how indispensable they really were. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a new promotion to celebrate and some incredible clients to serve. And this time, I'm working for people who understand that good relationships aren't just reassigned, they're earned. Trust me, there's nothing quite like watching karma work in real time. Have you ever had a moment where standing up for yourself led to something even better than what you thought you were fighting for? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below.